You ever seen this meme? Yeah, today we're going to be overanalyzing it. Sorry to be the no fun police. The only reason I even thought to do this is because a lot of people see this picture right here and run with it as fact. But this is a huge misconception. There are multiple abilities that exist in Dragon Ball that can be considered hacks, but most of them don't work like the straight up hacks that everyone's used to. Today we'll be looking at examples that people often bring up, as well as other examples that kind of go against this. We'll start with some popular examples. I picked 3 of them here. Most of these examples involve someone overpowering an ability that's already directly correlated with ki or strength. There is one I'll get to later on in this video, which is really the only example of someone actually overpowering hacks with raw power. But here's 3 popular examples. 1. Hit's abilities being countered by raw strength. 2. Characters overpowering or surviving Hakkais. 3. Gotenks leaving the Room of Spirit and Time with a shout. So let's break these ones apart. First we'll start with Hit. In the manga, Chapter 13 states that Hit's abilities only work on people who are less powerful than him, or equivalent to him. So in the manga version, it's flat out stated that this is equated to power. Hit's time skip isn't something separate from powers here. In the manga, it's blatantly connected, so it makes sense that someone stronger can actually bypass it. In the anime, there's a little bit more going on, but still. Hit's time skip isn't an example of someone overpowering hacks with raw power. When Goku fights against it, there's 2 ways he counters it. In their first fight, Goku is simply predicting and analyzing Hit with Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken to make up for the speed difference. And later on, before the Tournament of Power, when Hit's sent to assassinate him, Vados also explains it as Hit storing time to create a separate space, and therefore, Goku just destroys that space to get through time skip. This isn't anything crazy in Dragon Ball. Dimensional busting is relatively common. And when Jiren counters time skip, he also just predicts ahead like Goku. When Hit uses his time prison against Jiren, this is also an attack directly correlated to his ki, used only as a trump card because it takes up all of his energy. And in the manga, he does something a bit different. He uses something called time lag. It has a different effect, but it's also energy based. So with these abilities being straight up ki based, you just need to be stronger than Hit to surpass it. You're not really countering any crazy hacks here, you're just countering someone else's ki abilities. It's the same principle of like Broly walking through a Kamehameha. Obviously the attacks are very different, but one's a ki attack that's way weaker than the opponent, and he just brushes it off because he has so much more ki. Just as a more easily understandable example. Also, another thing to note, Jiren apparently transcends time itself, so like, it makes sense that time abilities won't work on him. Next, onto the thing about Hakkais. So, Hakkais are directly correlated to power and can be adjusted. This is showcased multiple times in the anime and manga. Hakkais do erase existence, but a tiny Hakkai doesn't just bypass durability. It's not like Beerus can make a minuscule Hakkai and it just erases the entire universe. That's not how it works. We pretty much blatantly see this with Toppo too. He has to adjust the power of the attack so they don't just erase people. And when Sidra hires that assassin, he says he's only giving some of his power. Not to mention, he didn't even know Frieza's full strength, especially after his new training. When he got hit by this attack, he was already at full power from the get-go. He was definitely stressed when trying to resist the attack. Clearly the attack is pretty strong, but still, it's just him overpowering it. And there's also the fact that he's not taking it directly from Sidra, which could definitely be part of it. So yeah, these attacks are powerful, but it can't just erase stronger opponents without being adjusted. Simply put, these attacks are also based on power, and when resisted or overpowered, characters aren't countering a hack that insta-kills them. Once more, they're countering a powerful ability with unique properties, but one that's still based on power at the end of the day. And then another popular example people bring up, Gotenks escaping the Room of Spirit and Time. This one doesn't really feel like a good example to me because Gotenks and Buu aren't really overpowering hacks here. They're just breaking dimensions, tearing a hole in reality with their sheer power. There's no magical forces keeping you in the Room of Spirit and Time. The Room of Spirit and Time is just a separate dimension, with its door being an entrance. If you destroy the door and get trapped in the room, there's not some magical presence keeping you in there, you're just in a different dimension with no way back. Think of the door as a portal to that dimension, and with no door, there's no portal back. So, Buu and Gotenks don't overpower any hacks here, they just break reality. This is something that happens a lot in Dragon Ball, at least after this point. Characters are so strong that they warp reality and can break through dimensions. And as for all those what-ifs about people being trapped and betrayed in the time chamber, well, I've never seen any of them, but people can't get trapped in here anymore. If you tried to trap Goku in here, he'd just break out, he's that strong. All you need is enough power to break reality. Once again, a great feat, I don't want to undersell that, but still, it doesn't require overcoming hacks here. Those are only 3 of the popular examples, and I'm sure there's way more that people use. But now I'm going to give my own counter examples. Times when there were actual hacks in Dragon Ball and people couldn't overpower them. By the way, if you're liking this video so far, be sure to drop a like. It really does help the channel and shows me you want to see more videos like this. As for the examples I'm about to cover, some of them aren't necessarily considered hacks, but that still does support the case here. Hacks implies that they bypass other forms of power by default. But with the examples I have, even if they're not necessarily hacks, the same principle still applies, because they're all examples of raw power not being able to overcome something, which implies the same would go for hacks. First, the Devil Might Beam. This attack can actually kill anyone regardless of their power, it bypasses durability. All it needs is some evil in their heart. This attack didn't work on Goku because he's pure of heart. It requires some sort of evil thoughts to actually work. This is one of the earlier examples of hacks, and it's never really been disproved. It's just that all the new villains are so fast that they outspeed it. Next there's Guldo. He's obviously the weakest member of the Ginyu Force, and by this point in the story, he's not only weaker than Vegeta, but also weaker than Gohan and Krillin. However, his time stop still does work on everybody. Also, this power is seemingly separate from his ki, correlated to his stamina and breath. If raw power could actually overcome any sort of hacks in Dragon Ball, then they would have been able to overcome Goldo here. Gohan and Krillin are stronger than him, and Vegeta is much stronger than him. Not to mention the rest of the Ginyu Force too is way above him, but they're all affected by the time freeze. Granted, they have no reason to move in it, but they should have been able to if they were that strong. Assuming you could truly overcome any sort of hacks, given enough power. The same goes for Ginyu's body swap, particularly when we look at the Resurrection F anime version. Takuma was off guard, but he should have been able to overpower a frog here. And to a lesser extent, Goku should have been able to overpower Ginyu. With Kaioken, he actually was stronger than Ginyu, but still he never countered this ability by just overpowering him. Then we can move on to the Buu Saga. No one could simply overpower Deborah's spit. With Piccolo, okay, that makes sense because he's weaker than Deborah, but it shouldn't have been a threat for Gohan or future Trunks for that matter when he fought Deborah. Especially for future Trunks considering the difference in strength there. If enough power overcomes any sort of abilities, Trunks at least should have been able to overpower this and possibly even Gohan even though the difference in strength wasn't that much. Also, what about Zamasu, the immortal future one? He was so vastly overpowered by everyone else, but it's not like people could just overcome immortality. I guess this is a bit of a stretch calling it hacks. One argument in his favor is the fact that he got this from Super Shenron, so that at least makes sense. Even Hakkais can't erase immortal people, and there's no mention of Super Shenron either. It's stated that Hakkais can't kill immortal people, regardless of how they got that immortality, which also implies that any sort of attacks can overpower immortality. Also, another example of this, Moro's magic. Moro was vastly overpowered in terms of raw strength, at least in the beginning of the Moro arc. Goku wasn't able to counter Moro's magic until he controlled Ultra Instinct, and as for Vegeta, he basically needed to learn the inverse of what Moro did. His magic bypassed everything, even with 7-3 when he used it. At multiple points throughout this arc, nobody's able to counter it by just being stronger than him. If anything, being stronger than him actually helps him. And yeah, I get it's because the magic caught them off guard and it was hard to counter. But the point is, if power can overcome any sort of abilities here, that would mean the sheer gap in power between him and Goku and Vegeta, for example, would have been more than enough to overcome this. Same for Gohan with 7-3. We could even go into other examples like the Mafuba. Piccolo should have never been sealed in the first place, assuming you could just overcome anything with raw power. Or Vegeta shouldn't have been affected by it when Frost used it against him. So really, the only example of this that comes to mind for me is the fact that Vegeta resisted being turned into candy. But even then, Daizenshu 2 states that Vegeta has some sort of innate ability to keep his strength even if his size is changed, so it could simply just be because of that. As reliable as Daizenshu is, it's still an external source, but even if you want to ignore that for some reason, Vegito's resistance to the candy beam is really the only example of Ki overpowering Buu's matter manipulation, if that's what's actually happening here. Also, there's some blatant misinfo around this too. Occasionally I see people bring up the fact that it's stated you can overcome hacks with raw power. It's never stated. Hacks isn't even an official term. It's a fan term used for power scaling. But even if you want to assume this is paraphrasing, there's never any statement that says something similar. You could overpower other key attacks by being stronger. If something is based on energy, you can overcome that by being stronger. Or if something is based on warping dimensions, yeah, you could do that with enough strength, you're just tearing reality. That's not an ability, that's just you having so much raw power that it breaks reality. But when you look at it more closely, most cases of people overcoming quote-unquote hacks in Dragon Ball, it's just raw stats being higher than someone else. Their power, their speed, their durability. And yeah, I know, I'm playing no fun police. The meme is very tongue-in-cheek. I just thought it would be an interesting topic because, first of all, I see this used seriously sometimes, but also because I wanted to see if this is actually the case. You know, it would have been really funny if this was the case too. But I do think it's really a stretch to say this would happen in any battle, especially with all the examples I gave of abilities not being overpowered. A lot of it just comes down to being stronger than your opponent. There's also the fact that there's a completely separate power system, magic. But it's shown multiple times that even with enough ki, you can't overpower magic. Like Shin paralyzing Gohan, even though he was already at full power. Or Babidi's magic being strong enough to protect himself against Piccolo, despite being much weaker. And pretty much anything surrounding Buu as well. Not to say that magic is hacks, but if you can actually nullify any hacks in Dragon Ball, you should be able to nullify any sort of magic as well. Because again, it's the same principle. If they could truly nullify hacks by being stronger, they should also be able to nullify other power systems too. But they can't even do that within their own verse. Even from people like Babidi who are much weaker. But this also isn't to say that they just can't overpower any sort of hacks. My point is, this was never a rule in Dragon Ball. It's never been stated and there's multiple examples against it. Also, frankly, if that were the case, a lot of people in Dragon Ball wouldn't really have unique abilities because they'd just be overpowered by raw strength. Deborah's spit wouldn't be a concern. Moro wouldn't have been a concern. Zamasu's immortality would be surpassed. You know, things like that. But let me know what you think below. Are there any other examples I didn't mention, either supporting it or going against it? And while on that topic, do you believe it? And I know it's a power scaling video, so as usual, be civil in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and as usual, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.